This episode of Tararua Fever is dedicated to our dear friend Tom. We love you and miss you, mate, and may you always rest in peace.
Oh, I don't know why, but sometimes we just need escape. Now Jerry's got his boots on and he's dragging us out and far away. It's a fever.
Kia ora and welcome back to another episode of Tararua Fever, the podcast that is anything and everything to do with tramping in the Tararua Ranges. This is episode 3, Gear There and Everywhere, and I am your host Jerry, an imposter expert who just loves to yarn about tramping in the Tararua Ranges. And on today's show, I'll be joined by my darling partner Lexi, and we will talk about a trip that we've done previously just about over a year ago. And then I'll be joined by a very cool guest for some interesting discussion on gear. So before we get into things, I guess I'd like to share some reflections that I've had since I've released the first 2 episodes. And it's really been in listening to those first 2 episodes again and thinking about who I am as a tramper, how I am as a tramper, and what I'm like when I'm out there in the elements. And in listening to the first 2 episodes, you've probably heard me talk quite a lot about that thing in my head that I call the precautionary principle, where I'm always scanning for any risk, the weather, anything else, or the terrain, and in my head, and just always taking everything in and never, it doesn't really switch off. But in comparing all that to my last guest in episode 2, Murray from the Hutt Valley Tramping Club, who spoke about enjoying the surprise of a tramp and not having all the information and seeing what happens, I thought it really spoke to his adventurous nature. And it's something that I really appreciate a point of view of and really respect. I think I often come back from a big tramp and I feel quite hardcore because I've done something epic. But I also understand that there's always people out there who have done much more hardcore things than I have and have way more experience in doing those hardcore things. So they might have that ability to turn off that anxiety that I sometimes have through that precautionary principle. I'm not going to call them the same things. I think they're 2 different things, that precautionary principle and anxiety. But they're always there in my head, turned on, I think. And in that regard, I might not do those sort of things that others might do because of that. Walking to Maungahuka in the dead of the night in really claggy conditions doesn't sound like my idea of a real fun time. But, doing the Northern Crossing with my darling when we did it in fantastic weather was a great time. That was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed that. More so than rather risking it in marginal weather and potentially getting into trouble. So I think what my point is here is that to a certain extent, I don't think there's any right or wrong way to tramp, as long as it meets the needs of you as a tramper, or to that matter, the people in your tramping party, because not everyone's the same. I think there's a balance to be had there as well. So given that, if you ever hear me obnoxiously expressing my opinion, as I can do, as everyone can do, about different situations, I guess that there's that caveat nested there that it's probably not what I would do because that would not make me feel safe. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the wrong or right way for anyone else. So anyway, enough of what I think about that life. You're not necessarily here for just that. We've got a lot of content to get through today. About 3 hours with my darling Lex about one of our previous trips. Another 2.5 maybe with our guest. Once we get through the dross of all today's pod, then it's probably about 7 hours of hardcore Tararua analytics. I kid, but I know that the listeners might be double checking that time bar on the bottom of their screen right now. But without further ado, I'll just quickly jump through that chamber door that makes my voice sound like I'm in a fishbowl, and I'll see you there with my darling on the other side in 1 moment. I'd like to introduce my one and only darling, Lexi Free. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. So for this interview, I thought we could talk about a very recent tramp that you and I did together over the summer in the Tararua Ranges. I think we were just saying that we left on New Year's Day, didn't we?
Yes. Early on New Year's Day.
Now,
we had been out the night before. Not too late.
Not too late.
I think we saw in midnight, but we were home soon after.
From my memory, I think I was pushing the early start.
Yes, and I was going with it, but also hesitant.
I think it was a 5:30 a.m. rise for us.
Yeah. I think even maybe 4:30, 4:35, something like that.
Yeah. For the listeners who don't know what we did, we were starting from the Wairarapa side, weren't we? We were going from the Holdsworth
road end.
Yeah. And because we were based on the Kapiti Coast side, and Mike and I staying with Mum and Dad.
They were legends and dropped us off.
They were. Sue and Co's were really, really lovely. And I think what I wanted was to get away quite early, like have one of those 7:30 departures. So it might have been a little bit extreme from me, but...
No, I think warranted. And I think we managed it from memory at around 7:30. And Sue got her bacon egg McMuffin from McDonald's. So everyone won.
Yeah, my mum loves the bacon egg McMuffin, so yeah. And so to, relieve the suspense for those who wanted to know our route, we were basically heading to the Kapiti Coast from the Wairarapa side, weren't we?
Coast to coast.
We're doing a coast to coast. From the Holdsworth road end coming out to Otaki Forks via basically Maungahuka. Mm-hmm. So those who know the Tararua Ranges well enough will start to realise which way we're sort of going. And that involved going over Mount Holdsworth and down to Midwahine, and then up onto the main range and over Maungahuka and down. So we'd both gone, well, actually, first of all, darling, we'd held off our trip for a couple of days because the weather forecast was awful, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. We were in Kapiti for Christmas and then we thought, let's go, like Boxing Day or the 27th. And then we held off and waited for that weather window because we didn't want to risk it for the biscuit with Maungahuka.
Yeah.
Under any kind of cloud cover or crap weather. It just didn't feel worth it.
Yeah. Noting, and for those who have listened to I think it was episode 1, where I talked about how you and I did quite an extensive period in the Tararua Ranges, and we left on Boxing Day 2022. Yeah. I think I had romantic ambitions of doing something similar, even though we weren't going for the length of time. But just having to hold off a little bit made us sort of relax and enjoy our summer break as well, didn't it?
I think so. And I think I love those longer missions and I'd love to do one again. 10 days in the bush, what could be better? But last year was quite gruelling. 2023 was a gruelling year. And I think I was the one that sort of put the brakes on a 10-day mish again. Because I just sort of thought, I don't have the energy.
Yeah.
I don't have the energy.
Yeah,
you need to have a bit of mental as well as physical stamina. And it felt like more of a restful break was needed. Yeah. For normal people, a restful break does not include 4 days in the Tararua Ranges, so restful for us maybe.
4 days in the Tararua Ranges doesn't quite feel long enough, but I also know that that's probably not the normal baseline either. So
No.
Yeah. And we also work quite demanding jobs. Yeah. But what I was going to say is when we did do the extensive time in the Tararua Ranges in 2022 or whatever it was, we had you and I hadn't gone up to Power Hut before or Mount Holdsworth, but we had gone part of the way up, hadn't we?
We had gone part of the way up to where it forks off to go down into
Tortilla
Flats.
Yeah.
And I'd been that way before as well. We had intended to go up to Power Hut and down to Midwahine that trip, but we didn't because we just, I think, were wasted after Mount Maita and the Wahine Pinnacles. So I think we just took an easier day and went down to Tortilla Flats.
Yeah.
So it was this trip was special because there was a leg or a path that we really wanted to achieve in 2022/2023, and so we were doing it the next summer, which is Maungahuka and Midwahine, which felt quite special to do.
Yeah.
It was not yet ticked off, and I hate it when people say they've done this or done that. Oh, I've done France, you can't ever really do something once and then claim to have ticked it off, but we just wanted to see it with our own eyes and walk it with our own feet, and it felt like a nice way to revisit that leg that we hadn't managed to do the summer before.
I think that's right. For me, it had been quite a long time since I'd been up to Power Hut and Mount Holdsworth. And the last few times that I had, the weather was a little bit hit and miss, quite cloudy, no view, but that day we had spectacular views, didn't we?
Oh, it was beautiful. And couldn't complain about the weather. I think there was a little bit of wind, but it was just sunny, clear, no clouds in the sky, not like the days before. we'd got up nice and early. We'd started nice and early. We can talk about Tantrum Gate, but no, it was the conditions couldn't have been nicer up there.
Yeah. I remember halfway up to Pau, we looked out over the Wahine River, looking out towards Totara Flats, and we couldn't actually see Totara Flats.
No.
But I think what we could see is sort of the right-hand side of Cone Ridge.
Yes, yeah.
And in the very distance, and it takes a little wee while to sort of connect the dots sometimes where you are, what you're looking out over. But I'm sure we could see like the ridge, not necessarily Mount Reeves, but the ridge that sort of has Mount Reeves on it.
Yeah, that's ringing bells.
And that's one of my favourite things to do in the Tararua Ranges is really connect dots and see what you can see from other locations. And maybe we'll save it for another podcast, but you and I had done another awesome winter trip last year, I think it was.
2023, yeah. June.
Yeah. June, where we went up to Alpha and then down to Tutuai, very special hut for us.
Very special hut.
It's where we met each other. And then over Mount Reeves and out. So
very illegal, shh.
Yeah. We won't mention the private property. That one will be saved for another podcast.
But Mount Reeves special, geographical centre of New Zealand.
Yes.
Even with the plaque as well. So that's a special little part of the ranges.
Yeah. So sorry, I don't mean to pause too much on that point, but I do love being able to connect dots in the Tararua, and just another opportunity to do it was really great.
So we're walking up to Pau Hut, and I don't think I'm normally a tantrum sort of person. I'm normally pretty keen and just get on with it and just say when I need a break. But I think it was a mixture of a busy year, a late-ish New Year's the night before, an early start, and new boots that played a role. New scarpers, which I had broken in, which I only bought on Boxing Day.
we did, knowing that we were going for this tramp. And I love my scarpers. I was keen for you to get the same pair as me because I know
great.
How durable they are. But I also understand that all feet are different and wearing things in can be a thing. And obviously, I don't think you had the great lead-in time of wearing in your big leathers.
That's right. So I found getting up to Pau quite challenging.
Yeah.
Like it was rubbing on my shins and getting a little sore. Yeah, so we just had to stuff socks and band-aids and things. So that was a bit miserable. Beautiful day, beautiful start, but it was hard.
I'm just looking at the map here, and Pau Hut is just below 1330 metres. You know, it's a substantial walk up there.
Oh, thank you.
I thought
it felt hard. Great. It shouldn't have been hard. We would have steamed it the year before, but
we would have. Hard. I think we would have, yeah. And I remember at Pau Hut having lunch, and we took our time, didn't we?
We took our sweet time. There were so many holiday makers up there. It was the 1st of January.
Yeah.
And it was probably about 30 people just coming and going with dogs or trampers or just day walkers. And
we were the first ones there for lunch, though.
We were the first ones there for lunch. And then by the time we left about 25, 30 people.
Yeah.
You had to weave our way off the veranda.
Really popular, but probably to be expected on
1st of January. Stat holiday.
Stat holiday, 1st of Jan.
Beautiful day.
Lovely weather, and it's also one of the great walks of the Tararua Ranges, so of course it's going to be very popular. I think that next leg... I
liked the next leg.
It was really lovely.
I like a ridge.
Yeah. Getting up onto Holdsworth was great. The view from Mount Holdsworth is beautiful. I mean, it's good from Pau Hut, but once you really get up there, we got to the trig. We hung out for maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Not too windy.
Wasn't too windy.
Not too windy.
And over in the distance, we were sort of trying to get our bearings, and I was like, I couldn't quite make it out properly. And then I think it was you that was like, darling, I think that's Maungahuka. I was like, no, it can't be. That's not right. And then the more I looked, the more I went, it is. So it was great to sort of have our destination for not that night, but the next night sort of
mapped out in front of us.
Yeah.
Where we were going, where we had come from, where we were going. So down Mount Isabel.
Well, I'm just looking at the height of Mount Holdsworth here, and it's actually 1470 metres.
Not unsubstantial.
Not unsubstantial. But then, yes, exactly. We had to just get over the top of Mount Holdsworth and down the other side, and then you've got Isabel, which is a small peak. I've previously described Arete. You know Arete on the Northern Crossing as this big blimmin' pimple that sits in the middle between Pukimatua and Arete. hut basically. And Isabel's not too different, eh?
No, not too different.
It's a big bloomin' lump in the way, but quite a nice
lump.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said a bad lump, and you're on sort of more ridgy territory yet again, and it's sort of nice once you dogleg off to Isabel, because then you're off the beaten track a bit, and you're not seeing little humans in front of you, little humans behind. You're sort of on your own wee adventure.
It was really
on
nice.
a less known track, and that felt quite nice.
We had that one person who was sort of we were playing leapfrog with.
Oh yeah, that's right.
She was really nice.
She
seemed really good.
Yeah.
And we stayed with her in Midwahine that night too. But Isabel was bigger than I thought. I hadn't been over Isabel before and down to Midwahine.
Right,
so
interesting. Because I don't remember that being at all mentally or physically challenging. I remember getting to Powell felt hard to me that day. Yeah. But then Isabel didn't feel that difficult. But interesting.
I don't know if Isabel felt challenging. It was just bigger than
you expected.
Yeah. And I remember coming down the other side of it, and it was really slippy.
So steep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where the new scarpers were quite problematic again. Just with the rub.
And that pressure on your shin, because you're going downhill, you're sort of leaning into the tongue of your...
Yeah. But it was very pretty. It was super steep, but really pretty. And you're sort of doing your Tarzan impression with your pack on, where once you're into the trees, you're holding on to slim branches and using the forest to kind of, gracefully fall. Yeah. Fall in an organised fashion.
I know that I slipped over a couple of times. I think even before we got to the bush line after Isabel, it was really muddy and quite thick grass.
Right.
Yeah. I just had a couple of tumbles where, I mean, it's never bad tumbles in the big thick sort of grass because you sort of got a soft landing. But
unless there's a Spaniard.
Unless there's a Spaniard, you do not want to fall on one of them.
Yeah.
Getting into the back into the tree line, it was one of those ones where the tree line was so low just as you got into it that you actually had to crouch down and actually sort of...
That's right.
From memory. I think I had that right. Yeah. Sort of really had to sort of duck into the tree line and then it sort of expands out from there.
Yeah. You're also tall.
I'm also quite tall. Mm. And then you're right. I think coming down from that tree line down to Midwahine felt like it took a while.
It did. And look, I think the full day was probably only, 7 hours total? 7.5?
Yeah, not too hard.
Not too hard, but it was just the second half of the day. As I say, I'm really belabouring this point. Late night, early morning, big long year the year before. We were fresh into 2024. And it just, it felt like a bit of a toil the way down, but an enjoyable toil. It didn't feel like too much of a slog.
It's funny with tramping. I know we don't want to labour that point, but I think that sometimes you go on a trip and things feel so easy, and then sometimes you go on a trip and things just feel super hard. And it doesn't matter what sort of trip it is. It could be both equally sort of proportionate in difficulty.
It just comes down to the day and your energy levels, and
exactly,
for women, like where your cycle's at, or what's been going on in life. How much mental load you've had, also stress at work. We both had a bit of that last year. So I think, it was a great day, and that descent was not bad, but it felt quite long for you and I.
Now, darling, I basically have this idea, and I'm sort of saying it while we're talking.
That's all right.
I want to put a poll out at some stage, and I'll probably do it pretty soon on the podcast, where I want to see people's perspectives of what is, say, the steepest climb or descent in the Tararua Ranges. I think I previously
all of
said...
them.
Yeah, all of them. I've said previously that I think Upper is one of my top ones, but...
it's nice. Easy, mate.
No problem.
No problems.
This one was particularly steep.
That one was, yes. Actually, yeah.
Coming down to Midwahine is very, very,
very steep.
And I don't know if I've said this before, but I often find going downhill
harder than going up.
Exactly.
I'm in total agreement with you there. Your lungs get blasted more going up, but it's just and we're quite tall, and I wonder if that has an impact too.
Oh, my knees ache.
Yeah, we've got a lot of leg and body to kind of, limber down, to negotiate down. We don't just sort of mountain goat it like little shorter, stockier people.
When I'm quite fit, going uphill is very easy for me.
Totally. Steaming it.
Coming downhill, I feel like a Bambi on ice.
Bambi on
ice. A newborn
ice.
deer.
And you get the knock knees when it's
Yeah.
really steep for a long
Yeah.
time too. I do.
So maybe when I do the next poll, I'll include the descent or the ascent from Midwayheen up
To Mount Isabel.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. The camp spot on the river,
Beautiful.
on the
Let's
Waihena
go back.
River at Midwayheen is fantastic.
Stunning.
The reason we didn't stay in our tent that night was because it was about 4:30. We're about to lose the sun anyway.
Mm.
We just thought it might be warmer and nicer in the hut.
And it was.
It probably was a good call, I think. But we did have a swim and we chilled out on the side of the river for ages, just chilling out. Eh?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
That was just,
Take the scarpers off.
Yeah.
Bask in the sun.
Yeah, bask in the sun.
Felt nice. Yeah. Midwayheen hut.
Yeah. How
What
cool.
a beauty.
How cool.
I want to go back and just stay there for 3 days on the river.
Yeah, we ended up staying in the hut and there was a few other people there too.
3.
Was there 3 others?
Yeah.
They were
there
really
was-
lovely.
Really lovely.
We had, well, one of them was a bit of a hard case. Not a hard case, super lovely, but quite direct. And her and her tramping buddy
Companion.
were from the Tararua Tramping Club, I think.
That's right.
Shout out to the Tararua Tramping Club. And credit to all the people we stayed with in that hut. The lady who were playing leapfrog with, and then those 2 people. They were very capable trampers. They
Yes,
struck me as
absolutely. No, there were no numpties in the hut that night.
No.
If anyone was, it would have been me. No, it felt like quite an experienced bunch of wahine
Yeah.
and plus Jerry. No, that was a good night.
Plus me, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that I can get a little anal retentive about early starts, but I think once you're in the bush, I don't mind so much an 8 o'clock start or a 7:30 start because you don't have the faff of getting into the bush,
No,
which was often half the
you're
battle.
there already.
You're there
You're
already. I think when I like to set out at the start of a trip, it's nice and early so that you
But there's
can-
also politics at play. So, if others are getting up earlier than you're getting ready, you also start to slowly, wake up and get up. But you don't want to sort of use up all if there's limited bench space.
Yeah.
Cook your breakfast at the same time as necessarily. So, at some level, it's first in, first served.
that hut etiquette still plays a part, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So I think everyone got up just slightly before us, and ergo we were slightly delayed getting off earlier in the morning. But that was fun.
It's fine. It's fine. And because we felt a bit tired, we didn't really want to push ourselves or be too hard on ourselves. Did we?
You're saying we, but I think it was mostly me felt tired.
Oh,
That's
darling.
very generous.
Oh, darling. I wasn't super rosy. And
So this bit was hard.
Well-
I found it hard.
we probably walked along the side of the river from Midwayheen to the overbridge for about half an hour, maybe,
Half an hour, 20 minutes?
Yeah, yeah.
Not too long.
having good chats.
Good chats, great chats.
I think half the fun of tramping is getting lost in a chat and the time flies.
Yeah, we have good chats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then we did get across the overbridge and then it's
And then it's hell.
Yeah.
I found that very challenging yet again.
next
I think
next stop Ao Kaparangi.
our kaparangi. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is one where I said, Jerry, can we have a lolly? We stopped and had quite a few comfort breaks. I think at least 2 before we got to the ridge
That's right.
because I needed a little TLC.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was no problem at all. I remember, it was a slog, but I remember we got up to about the 900 metre mark, and I'm just looking at the map now trying to gauge it.
It was just before the tree line ended.
Yeah, and the tree line was really starting to thin out, and we could see over looking back at Isabel and that ridge coming down where it stops and turns into a spur.
Mm.
And darling, I was like, this is what I love about the Tararua Ranges is just not only pinpointing where you've been and other locations, but just looking back at where you've come from and how just the sheer steepness and impressiveness of the landscape is just breathtakingly beautiful.
And when you're in that valley again, just feeling a bit off the beaten path and feeling quite isolated feels nice.
Yeah. I meant to mention before when we were on top of Mount Holdsworth, we could see the plane crash that sits, and I'm just looking it up on the map. Where is it? I think it sits by Angle Knob, sort of just further along, and we could see that glistening in the distance, couldn't we?
that was
when we were over
glinting.
there? So I'm trying to remember if we could see it the next day from Ao Kaparangi, and I'm pretty sure we could.
Yeah.
But that whole hillside from sort of Shingle Slip Knob where that aircraft crashes. It's got a bit of a creek coming down it, and then it hits Isabel. It's just so steep and so impressive, and I just, it takes my breath away. It does. And at that point, you're sort of starting to get out of the tree line as we headed up to Aokaparangi, and you're starting to sort of not only look back at where you've been, but you can actually, it's getting very exposed again and quite steep, and you're getting quite a lot of other views that you can take in around you as well. I'd start getting overwhelmed in a good way.
Yeah. And then you get to the ridge. Yay, I love a ridge.
And then we got to the ridge. At that point, we're at 1354 meters, 1,354 meters. And I think you and I mean, every time I get onto the sort of main ranges, I feel a bit of a lump in my throat, a bit of anxiety, just because you're really exposed up there and you're at the whims of the weather.
And it was cold. Was it a southerly?
It wasn't a southerly, it was a nor'wester coming through, which is sort of the prevailing wind around there. It wasn't too heavy, but it was jacket weather. Well, some sort of...
Yeah, you couldn't stay on the ridge and just pause. You had to be...
Yeah.
You had to have a jacket on.
And, well, I mean, some people might have had a t-shirt on. I certainly wanted to layer up a bit more. And I think this time, it was the first time I'd gone from Aokaparangi to Maungahuka, and I'd always wondered sort of how long that trip was. And it's a decent amount of time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think again, if you were, and I'm calling it out, like I wasn't that fit at that point in time. If you were really fit and smashing it, you could probably do it in 3 hours, maybe more.
Yeah, I think in my head,
half day.
In my head, 3 hours was about the bulk standard time. I think we possibly took about 4.5, 5.
Yeah. No, not 5. But
not
it was
5.
4.5.
4. Yeah. I should write these down when we're trekking along. And it really is sort of in character with those main ranges, how you sort of go up and down these small and bigger peaks. Sometimes it's a little bit of rock climbing. Sometimes it's quite, nice tarns along the way, and it's a bit muddy and stuff. And we met that one young lady who...
Oh, yeah. She didn't want to talk to us too much. I think she was on severe calorie restrictive expenditure.
And good grief.
Yeah.
She'd stayed the night at Kaim, gone over, hit Maungahuka, and then was heading to Anderson Memorial, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I think this was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and so she still had a ways to go. We thought she might still have 4 hours to go.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to say to her, why don't you just turn back and come to Maungahuka with us?
No, she was not having a bar of it.
I don't think she was she?
Yeah, nah.
She was a woman on a mission, which is fair enough. Didn't want to interfere. But I don't know if that would have been my plan. I was probably looking for the nearest hut at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But otherwise, I think we had a bit of lunch on the tops around about the Simpson Point. There's sort of a peak at 1,174 metres where I think we sort of had lunch. Just sort of noting, as well, that we didn't go down to Aokaparangi Biv.
No, we did not.
Which some of the others did who were ahead of us, but
yes.
It would have taken another 40 minutes each way or something like that. And
we just wanted to press on, I think.
Yeah, that gives us something to go back for, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So have not ticked that one off in terms of hut bagging, tagging and bagging.
Tagging and bagging. We'll stay there one day.
Yeah. And we got to Maungahuka, 4 o'clock-ish? 4:30?
Yeah, 4:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A reasonable time.
And we were slimly in.
I think we
and
took...
snagging the last 2 bunks.
Was it the last 2? It might have been the last
2 available bunks, yeah.
And starting to, have chats with the other people in the hut.
Yeah.
There was that group that had been choppered in.
That's right, yeah.
I think they got choppered to Anderson Memorial.
And I think they had perhaps bitten off a little more than they could chew.
They were a bit nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a father with some kids, some very fit teenagers.
That's right.
Yeah.
There was another guy and his son who turned up.
That's right. They went up. Oh, maybe they got the last bed. Maybe one more.
Maybe they did.
But it was a chocker hut.
Yeah.
And it was the 2nd of January, and it was just packed. And we've been obsessing over Maungahuka for a while and just sort of thinking it is so remote and hard to get to and needing a perfect weather window. And we thought we'd just nailed all the criteria to get there and sort of have it.
Yeah.
maybe not to ourselves, but have it semi-remote. But I think, again, just the mixture of a stat holiday, beautiful weather.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the most popular place.
You can see why it's popular, because it's pretty hardcore up there, but it's
Oh,
also
so-
quite accessible.
And beautiful.
Yeah. We had the other two, that couple that came in who worked for Doc, and they lived in Haast and Mackenzie country, in the Mackenzie country, basically.
Yep.
And they were really cool. And then we went to bed that night, and we had 4 others come in, two different
at
times.
night, in the dark.
9:30 and 10:30, I think it was.
When we got up, the floor was strewn with sleeping bags and sleeping mats. Yeah, it was a packed little hut.
And it wasn't a nice night. The cloud rolled in.
Cloud rolled in, the wind picked up.
Yeah, it was real claggy. It was wet outside.
That's right.
That couple from Haast, they tented outside. They were hardcore. But we got up the next morning to quite a nice sunrise.
Yeah, we had breakfast on the ridge. We had coffee on the ridge.
Yeah, by the tarn, watching the view over the Wairarapa.
It's nice.
I'd always wanted to do that.
We started quite early, I think. I think we left again at 7:30.
Yeah, about that. Yeah. Now, can I ask you, because this next bit was a bit crazy, was it what you expected? Had I outlined it?
Maybe not. So, so I knew that they were sort of pinnacles.
Yeah.
But and you said it was gnarly, and you said, it would have to, be quite on our game.
Mm.
And look, someone's gnarly is someone else's easy. So, you have to be careful not to overstate it. All you can do is talk from your own perspective and your own risk and range threshold. I found it quite gnarly. Hands and feet, 3 points of contact type stuff.
Yeah.
Sheer drops in some places. The narrowest of shelves, for a foot or a handheld with your, bag weighing you down behind you, and perhaps more fun if you were like a trail runner or just doing a day walk. But I think just that you added, clunky heavy boots and, heavy pack. It felt challenging.
I think, and
I think the 4 who got copted in to Anderson Memorial, I think that they were, because we stopped and had a snack, and I think they caught us up, and I think it wasn't even gnarly at that point, and I think they were quite knock-kneed already.
That's right.
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who doesn't feel confident, perhaps doing something slightly more technical.
And we were quite lucky because we had really nice weather.
Yes, beautiful.
I wouldn't really want to do that in anything other.
Nope.
Yeah. And for clarity for the listeners, we were not heading down to Neil Forks. This was on our way to sort of Kaim Hut area. And predominantly between the Maungahuka hut and the ladder, wasn't it? The steel ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. After the ladder, it was happy days. Happy-ish days.
Happy-ish. It pitters out and chills out. So yeah. And then we did
some beautiful ridges and tops again.
And again, looking out, going over the Yikes and Vossler and Boyd Wilson Knob all the way, like looking out at Winchcombe. I really want to do Winchcombe, darling.
I know you do.
It looks so crazy steep and gnarly, but it looks very appealing. So
We'll find you a crazy friend.
Yeah, I'll get that done at some stage. And it actually took us way longer to get to what I would say is Bridge Peak, because we didn't go to climb. We were heading down to what we thought we might do, Pen Creek, but we ended up at
Field
Hut.
Yeah.
We kept it simple, didn't we?
We kept it simple. And like a part of me is a bit sad we didn't make it down the valley into Pen. But again, I had a great day. I loved that walk. But it was when we got to the turn-off, just before you go up to Kaim, which we didn't do.
Mm.
Again, I was getting quite sore shins. So my scarpers were rubbing.
Yeah.
I was getting blood.
Yeah.
It felt quite sore, ouchy.
Again, we're just knackered. We're just knackered from
tired.
the big
Yeah.
So the plan was to possibly go down to Pen Creek for the hut and
then back up again.
Pen Creek's hut,
morning.
for the night and come back up. That's right. But it kind of felt a bit pointless if we're just coming back the way we came.
A little bit of added walking.
Yeah.
So I was really happy with Field. I know it's not the most remote or exotic of huts, but Field Hut felt like a really good day for us. Field to Maungahuka or Maungahuka to Field. Yeah.
No, it was really nice. And a pretty bog standard night in Field. A nice party, another nice party we were doing the Southern Crossing, and that guy that came slightly later in the evening.
Yeah, that's right.
He'd just come over the Southern Crossing, hadn't he?
Trail runner.
He'd made...
He'd come from Tutawai.
him and his partner had gone to Tutuai. He'd walked her out, and then he'd, in the afternoon, gone over Merchant Ridge, over Alpha, over the Southern Crossing, and got to us at about 9 o'clock.
Crazy.
Yeah, he was super lightweight. He was sort of a trail runner, but he also was slightly packed. His whole thing, he was a gear designer, and his whole thing was about packing lightweight, but also packing good quality and all that. So he was a hard one to get away from a chat from, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then the next morning was raining.
No, that's right.
Yeah, and we walked down to Otaki Forks, which was really nice.
It was nice. It felt like quite a nice, relaxed day after 3 largish days.
Yeah. We didn't have to do much.
It was quite a cruisy one.
Yeah. Got out, I think, 11 o'clock, midday-ish.
That's right.
Took our time. Yeah. No, that was a really nice walk, that trip.
That was a nice walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember not feeling as athletic as I would have liked, but gosh, going from one, and it's not coast to coast, but going from the Wairarapa Valley to over to Kapiti.
Yeah, Kapiti side was...
It feels really special.
It felt like an accomplishment.
It did feel. Good way to start a year.
Yeah.
Good omens.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you for joining. I think there's a few more trips that you and I can discuss on future episodes. But for now, let's take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
Thank you for having me, Tararua Fever.
Oh, we've been walking miles, and now we'll take a break. And Jerry's got his boots up, so we'll sit a while. Don't you go away.
So, introducing my next guest for the show today, kia ora Mike from Earthy Sky. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Mike, I note that we're in the Earthy Sky headquarters here in Christchurch. It's a very cool spot. There's lots of jackets and gear all over the place.
What are you trying to say? It's quite messy?
Well, there's also a restored sleeping bag from someone who might have been well known in the past right next to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's part museum, part everything, really.
Ah, fantastic. And I also was it your mum that I just met?
Yes.
Ah,
yes.
fantastic.
Very much in the family.
A very family-orientated business I read online just before on your website.
Perhaps too much sometimes,
Yeah.
but yes, no, very family oriented.
Yeah. I guess, Mike, in terms of tramping in the Tararua Ranges or other quite rugged and harsh environments, I'm doing a little bit of a segment at the moment on sort of the gear that we might like to use in those sort of environments, the gear that I normally use and stuff like that. So I guess to start off with, for this segment, can you tell us a bit more about Earthsea Sky? Maybe a tiny bit of background, knowing that we might go into a bit more in another episode. But what's Earthsea Sky all about?
Well, we've been manufacturing in New Zealand since the 1920s, and that was the previous family business, which was Ferrydown, or Arthur Ellis, and then subsequently just been through iterations, been continuing to manufacture in New Zealand. We focus on outdoor performance clothing, and with it, and yeah, that's really us. We try to keep our runs really small and manageable and sustainable. But focusing on a really high quality product.
Ferrydown, I think a lot of people will be quite familiar with.
Yeah. It hasn't been around for a few years now, but yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a sleeping bag that I got when I was 17 that I still use. It's my normal sleeping bag for tramping.
Awesome.
And I'm 36 now for anyone who's listening. So, that's almost 20 years old, and it's still fantastic.
Fantastic.
It's the super light edition, I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Lightweight bag.
Yeah.
But nice.
Yeah. And I think I just sort of said we might go into some of the background of Ferrydown and the past Earthsea Sky story in another episode.
Yeah, my father David was the one that was pioneering a lot of that outdoor equipment and revolution back in the back in his day. So yeah, no.
Incredible. Can I just ask, when did Ferry Down stop and Earthsea Sky begin?
So my grandfather sold it in the 80s, and then my father continued to work for Ferry Down Arthur Else for a few years, and then after that it was sold to Northern Feather, and then he decided after a year to resign and start Earthsea Sky.
Oh, okay. So when did Earthsea Sky start? Sorry.
1990.
Ah, right. So it's been around for a long time.
It's been around for a while.
Yeah. And how long have you guys been based here in Christchurch? Maybe.
So we've always been based in Christchurch.
Right.
But we've always had a Dunedin factory and a Christchurch, at least one Christchurch factory.
And I guess being based in Christchurch, you've got quite good access to test the gear. Arthur's Pass just there and other areas.
Yeah. It's a really good launch pad for anything in the Alps, really, which is awesome.
Okay. And I want to talk about some of the gear that you guys sort of make and supply now. But first of all, I was reading on your website today about how you guys are 100% New Zealand made products, and you've got quite a big focus on sustainability there.
Absolutely. I think that the way that we can actually maintain and speak to what we actually are sustainability as opposed to farming it out to a third party. And we have a very tight control on how fabric is utilised, but then also where that fabric or that byproduct goes as well. And anything that we can do to sort of further process that and then reduce waste further, we absolutely do. So very, very little of it goes to the to landfill or anything. We just do everything that we can to keep it away from there, really, because the fabric always it comes from all around the world, like Italy, Japan, America, and it's really high quality fabric. And the last thing we want to do is put it into landfill, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, such a waste.
Yeah. And just from your sort of industry point of view, is that quite a contrast to other brands or products that are being produced?
Yeah, especially from the big manufacturers.
Right.
I think you get to a certain point where you become very big and you lose control of a few things like that, and then you rely on other people to make those sustainability choices for you and on behalf of you. Okay. Where I think if it's small and you're doing runs and it's local industry, then you can really have a really big input into it.
Yeah. Right. And I guess, like, being quite a family-orientated business, have you guys had quite a focus on trying to keep control of that and sort of not expanding too far or too wide? So that
I think we're very mindful of it.
Yeah.
And trying to keep everything as high. Yeah. But as long as if you get big enough production runs and things like that, I think you do. Yeah. Start to lose that. It's also why we buy forward in fabric and buy it in large amounts, so we don't have to buy by the run and then rely on the quality because it often changes between runs, so we can definitely audit the quality of fabric coming in. Yeah.
So I guess I'm doing this segment on gear, and I guess from my point of view, I've been tramping since I was a youngster with my dad, based in Wellington. Tararua Ranges were a back doorstep. So that's my most familiar sort of area of tramping. And during that time, a lot of the gear I acquired was, my mum and dad buying me a jacket for I'm pretty sure it was my 16th birthday, and that was a MacPack one. And I still have that jacket. It's cool. It's a really good jacket. My sleeping bag when I was 17, Ferry Down. I've gone through various pairs of boots over the years and stuff like that. I've got a pair of gaiters that are quite ancient now. So over time, I've acquired gear. It's got worn out, and I've had to replace it. So, and that's starting to happen a bit more now. So I'm sort of thinking about my next purchases and what I want to get. So I guess where I'm going with this is I'm quite conscious of my next purchases and where I would like to buy them and the scope of the gear that Earthsea Sky have. What is that? Can I get my next tent here, or can I get my next jacket here?
We focus primarily on outdoor gear, so like any apparel and things. We also work quite closely with other companies in our shop here. We are working to offer those other products as well, whether it be tents or sleeping bags or gaiters. in trying to source ones that are either made in New Zealand or made within Australasia. And then other products that are also backed with legacy products. So you buy a tent and then your fly breaks, finding somebody that will be able to provide that going forward. And that, so if you do have a 16-year-old tent, you're still able to get a set of poles, or you're still able to get a fly, so you're not having to just throw things away. Which I think that's...
And I can see how that ties into what we were talking about before with sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
we're very mindful. We're always in the outdoors as a family and very aware that there's a massive throwaway culture, especially in the outdoor industry.
Yeah. And in terms of products, I was walking with you the other day at lunchtime when we bumped into each other, and I think I kind of had a bit of a faux pas there where I was like, I think I've got some dry bags that I used at Ursi's Guy, and they turned out to be Sea to Summit. And I just, it sort of showed how much I've been concentrating on my dry bags over the last wee while. But so you don't, so for example, do dry bags?
No. We leave that to the guys that are producing a lot of them.
Yeah. Maybe your Mac Packs or your Kathmandus or something.
Yeah, also to Summit, those guys that are producing huge volumes of them. You're never going to be able to convince somebody to spend 4 or 5 times the price on a particular dry bag.
Yeah. That might be why the buckles are broken.
Could be what you're doing as well.
Because of the way I'm using it. Yeah. And so, in terms of some of our past catch-ups, obviously, I work around the corner from this shop here, so I've been able to come in over the past few months and catch up with you. We've gone into a bit of detail around sort of some of the technology that you use and how it's used. I know that, for example, I've got, I think it's my backpack t-shirts that I have had for maybe 10 years plus now that I need to think about upgrading. And sometimes when I'm walking, it's quite hot and steamy weather, but it's still quite damp outside. And on the inside, my jacket's keeping me quite dry, well, dry-ish, but then I start perspiring. And so we were going through some of the sort of processes that entails and how Earthsea Sky products can actually provide quite a good
solution.
Yeah, solution.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that often people these days, especially in that wet, sort of warm environment, come to us and say, my waterproof jacket's leaking. And usually we have to take a big step back then and say, well, what are you wearing underneath? Because that, in New Zealand, where we have a wet, warm climate, it really affects the performance of your jacket. And often the layers underneath your jacket provide much more of the breathability component than you think. Waterproof breathable fabrics work really well when you've got temperature differential. So when it's warm next to your body and cold outside, and it draws that vapor through. But often when we're in New Zealand and we have that warm, it can mean that your jacket builds up perspiration on the inside, especially if you've got layers like with natural fibre next to your skin. It really does accentuate that. So that's why we often have that conversation with synthetics versus merino. Yeah, and we sell both, but there's definitely there's a time and a place for both, really. And when you're active in the outdoors tramping, then often we say, hey, look, wool is fantastic for odour control and hygiene, but it's best used when you're sedentary. So when you're stationary at night, so maybe taking a piece for the hut or tent at night is a really good idea. But during the day when you're perspiring and working hard, it often leads to complications, especially with either exposure or condensation in your rain jacket, which is not the most fun thing to deal with. Yeah. I live in my polyprops most of the year round, but particularly when I'm tramping, I'm definitely wearing my polyprops. Yeah, well, that's the thing as well, because synthetics, people obviously assume when you're talking about synthetics, you're talking about polyprops, but there's different types of synthetic where you've often got polypropylene, which was brought out in the 40s, which was great because it didn't absorb moisture, and it didn't disperse moisture, but it does have the downside of imbibing odour, and it's a really cheap way of producing, so it's always very cost effective and often used as an entry level into layering in the outdoors. But then you have polyester, which does work and does wash clean of odour and that was brought out in the late 80s, early 90s, and that's a perfect layer to be using next to your skin, but also providing that extra little bit of hygiene protection.
And is it the breathability with the polyester?
So the polyester is often a bicomponent.
Right.
Or the particular types of polyester. Like there are, like anything, there's carpet wool and there's merino, or there's different types of polyester as well. But the working polyester next to your skin will absorb the moisture and then disperse it. So it will be bicomponent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's often what you want. If you've got layers underneath that are pulling the moisture away from your body, it makes such a big difference to your rain jacket, but also just your level of comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of underlayers, I've got a t-shirt, a tramping t-shirt that I might get from you, which would be quite breathable, bi-component product.
Yep.
But I might want something under that as well if it's kind of cold. And that would be also a bi-component product.
Yeah, it can be. If you really want to use a wool product, you can use a really, really light wool next to your skin. That's the best way. Like if you can get down to 120, like a really, really light layer next to your skin, because you don't want it too thick, because merino holds 10, 20 times more moisture than its synthetic counterpart, essentially.
Yeah.
So you're talking like having a build-up of condensation, and especially when you're wearing a pack, because then you're cutting down the layers of breathability, or the places that your jacket can breathe, and the places that your base layers can breathe, essentially, as well. So, yeah, minimizing... You want to just have layers that are pushing the moisture in one direction. Yeah. So that's why we tend to say, like, we'll have like a... Mostly synthetic on your top would be perfect, like if you really want that fine layer next to your skin, but you want all the moisture pushing out away from your body, and anything you can do to help your rain jacket breathe, especially when it's warm and wet, the better, really.
Yeah.
Stops those cold, damp build-ups of moisture next to your skin, and then when you stop, that's when the real danger factor happens, is that if you are wearing a lot of natural fibre, what tends to happen is that you're then using your body heat to heat the water that's in the garment, and that's when you lose your body temperature, and then you add the wind chill factor, and that's when you get cold and wet.
That's exactly where my mind was thinking. I actually had two thoughts there. First of all, classic trampers, I think we're all probably guilty of this, is overlayering when we get going, because it's quite cold. It might be 7:30 in the morning. You're about to get off.
Absolutely.
You do it knowingly as well. I'm cold right now.
Yes.
I'm not that warm. I'll put my pack on, and 10 minutes down the road we can delayer.
Yes, absolutely.
But if you kind of go with a bi-component synthetic product,
yes,
you might actually have that relative warmth, but you won't necessarily heat up. This is a question, I guess.
Yeah.
You might not heat up as much as you would with my polypropylene.
It tends to temperature regulate a wee bit better than natural fibre, because once you moisture load a natural fibre, it tends to heat up more, and then you produce more sweat.
Yeah.
And then it can get a wee bit hot and steamy pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then the downside of that is if you do have like it's the same with down as well, because down's really affected by moisture.
Right.
If you start off walking in it, and then you lower the thermal efficiency to a point that then when you take it off, it's say 60% thermal efficient it was to start with, and you put it back on later in the day, then it's still going to be that 60%. It's not going to magically cook off all that moisture and be at 100% again.
Right.
So that's why we say, like, look, if you're going to use those sort of layers, take them off, and then in the morning, and then put them on again at night.
In the hut.
Yeah. When then you can get all the benefits of it without any of the drawbacks.
Yeah, and you might come out of the bush slightly less foggy.
Yeah, well, yeah. But the thing is, just when you stop for morning tea or lunch, you just don't want to be in that awkward situation where you're getting really cold. And
that was the second thought I'd had, and there was a scenario a couple of years ago where a couple of friends of mine and I were coming over the back of Kapiti Nui in the Tararua Ranges, and it was terrible weather, and we were getting more and more exposed, I guess. And as we got higher and higher, I was really trying to be quite conscious of the temperature, because it's quite a hard slog. I knew that we were going to get really, really hot, but as we got more exposed, I also wanted to make sure that we were well layered, so that, like you say, you don't keep on getting hypothermia without even realizing, essentially.
Absolutely.
I kind of always think of it for runners and who go, running in the bush and on those tramping tracks, where, and this is a bit different because they might not be wearing that sort of woolen gear, but their temperature drops without them even realizing because they are so hot and they're going at a certain pace and stuff like that. And I always think it's quite a silent danger that you might not realize. So I think you were just sort of touching on it before, trying to minimize how hot and sweaty you will get.
Yep.
And then also contrasting that against the conditions that you might be in any given moment.
Yeah, it's often really affected by when you're getting above the bushline as well, and out of that shelter belt, it accentuates it. Like those passes and things like that, it really does bring it home what you're wearing underneath, and then you can get very cold very quickly, especially if you're coming up on the lee side and then passing over into the prevailing wind, and then bang. Yeah. That's when the danger zone is. Yeah.
And again, like in the Tararua Ranges, ideally anywhere, ideally I'm not wearing too much, and I can always layer up as I get more exposed as needed based on the conditions at the time.
Absolutely. It's a great way to do it. And if you can have several lighter layers, then you can layer to the conditions as well.
Yeah.
Like as we all know, like within New Zealand, give it 15 minutes and it can be a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah, really
so
can.
Like, it's worth having those layers just in the bag so you can regulate.
I actually spent a while with the sort of gap in my gear where, and it was mostly quite helpful for at night in a hut or in your tent or whatever, where just like a layer, kind of like a shell layer, because I've got my parka, I've got my Kathmandu jumper that I still have from when I was 16. I really need to upgrade my gear at some stage, but some of it's still okay. But it was that sort of warmer layer for when you stop it and you're at night and it's quite cold and you just sort of need that extra layer. And I don't often wear it when I'm walking. My friend gave me a North Face jacket and it's synthetic, it's not down.
Yep.
And it's very light. I can stuff it into a small stuff bag. It goes to about that big. I was wondering, do you guys sell sort of things on that sort of scale?
A lot of those fabrics are everybody's different. So what we try to do is give everybody the information because everybody's walking in different places.
Yeah.
So if we give you as a customer a idea of how all these fabrics work, you're going to know how you're going to layer with it.
Yeah.
Because you could be canyoning, or you could be kayaking, or you could be climbing or tramping. They're all sort of slightly different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like being able to manipulate what you take and find the fabrics that work best for you is what we sort of try to do. Because we have fabrics that are going to be much better purely in a wet environment. Yeah. And then you've got ones that are going to be slightly waffled and they stand off your skin and they create sort of like a warm air barrier like the power grids, and they'll sort of be better in like a alpine tramping sort of idea. And then you've got like a lightweight synthetic options, and then you've got heavier weights, like you've got an alpha, which is like the new sort of lightweight thermal jacket option, which is highly breathable. Then that's really cool. But then you've also got like a heavier version of that, which is essentially like a Primaloft jacket.
Right.
But there's horses for courses, really. It's all about everybody's different, so just finding a particular set option is really difficult for people.
And like you say, not everyone's tramping like I am, particularly in the Tararua Ranges. Like you say, people might be canoeing or canyoning or... Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if we can give you some knowledge, then often we can find a solution.
Yeah. It strikes me that there's quite a bit of science in it for people to sort of grapple with and understand. Obviously, I'm still grappling with it as you're talking to me.
No, it's a really tricky, and I really feel for the consumer because there is so much misinformation out there.
Right.
And people will always proclaim that theirs is the latest and greatest, which makes it really difficult for the end consumer, for sure.
Yeah. I think also, for me, look, this is not sponsored content. I'm not getting anything out of talking to you other than just interesting chat for a podcast. But I used to go to Outdoor Bivouac in Wellington all the time. My work shifted around the corner from there on Willis Street.
Great bunch of
I really want to do an interview with them. I've really appreciated them. But you go in there and you've got Patagonia in your face, you've got North Face, you've got all sorts of brands, and I don't necessarily know which one's good for what.
Yes.
And the people in there are lovely and they can give you a lot of information. But I guess I don't know if I've ever experienced the sort of level of detail that you're providing actually right now.
Yeah, well, some people say I've got far too much time on my hands or far too geeky about this sort of thing.
I would say as subject matter expert.
It's something that I think just because of the family connection with this, we got like a little bit of a passion for.
Yeah.
And I'm hyper aware that like there isn't the same sort of knowledge in the outdoor space that there used to be.
Yeah.
And everybody's sort of persuaded by mass media and things like that, and not necessarily what their conditions or what they're using it for are. So that's why we try to provide like that level of education as opposed to, I want to sell you this. Yeah. And most of the time we go, hey, what have you got at home?
Right.
Yeah. No, don't buy this. Go use what you've got that is going to work perfectly fine, and then come back and see us once that's worn out.
Yeah.
Or actually, we've actually got the bags with fabric scraps out here. Can you repair what you've got?
Oh, really interesting. I remember the first time I met you, I was talking about my backpack parka.
Yes.
And I think you knew the one I was talking about. And it's actually a really good quality one. And you told me how to wash it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And
most people don't know that you've got to wash your jackets. And it's the biggest thing that you can do is just a little bit of maintenance can exponentially extend the lifetime of your garments.
Yeah.
Or any of your outdoor gear, really.
Right.
Yeah.
On that note, I did want to talk quickly on jackets.
Absolutely.
Parkas are, I think, the most essential part of tramping sometimes. The number one rule that my dad taught me growing up is always have your parka packed at the top of your pack for when the conditions change. And I still live by that.
Absolutely.
I did a tramp with my dad and interviewed him about it on the first podcast I did.
Awesome.
About how we walked to the top of basically the headwaters of the Otaki River in the Tararua Ranges and spent basically 3 to 4 days in horrendous weather. We jumped into the river at the headwaters and then it started pouring down like 3 or 4 days straight, rivers flooding, and we had to climb out of some really ropey sections of it. It was a case of bush bashing in the river and out, and none of it was easy. It was really hard. On top of that, in the second podcast though I talked to another member of the Hutt Valley Tramping Club, which is where my family has been associated with, and they used to do trips into the headwaters of other really gnarly peaks in the Tararua Ranges, and basically come out through the rivers. Given that, you need some really sturdy parkas. You really need gear, especially if it's quite wet and you're in there, but also if it's pouring down at the same time. You need something really sturdy. Can you tell me a little bit about Earthsea Sky and the parkas you provided?
Or I'll just give you an overview of waterproof gear and what you sort of need to look at and what you need to maintain. I think is really important because there's a lot of misunderstanding of what your parka will do, and I think there's some with recent changes with what the waterproofing world has had to change and adapt to with the removal of chemicals and resins that they're not allowed to use these days. It makes it even more important to layer correctly underneath, but also have realistic expectations of what your rain jacket will do.
Right.
That's why, so what's happened with the DWR on the outside of your jacket, which is durable water repellency, which is that water shedding ability, and that's what your jacket really relies on to keep breathability up. Essentially, is that they've removed a lot of those chemicals out that were not eco-friendly. And so what they've done then is they've reduced those, which is great, and everybody's abided by it, which is awesome as well. But the downside is that it doesn't last as long. So if your jacket wets out on the outside, that's why we always go back to your base layers, is that if your jacket's wetting out on the outside, it's struggling to breathe a bit.
Right.
And this is an industry-wide problem. So layering underneath makes a really big difference to that pushing that water vapor away, more so than it ever used to in the past. And it's also really important that you wash your rain jacket on the inside because some of the solvents and things they used on the particular membranes as well,
Yeah.
have changed. So they're not as robust against oils, salts, sunscreen, DEET, like all those things that we sort of tend to use in the outdoor world. If you've got any of that skin contact, generally we sort of see those damage areas around the back of the neck.
Okay, yeah.
You'll start, like, we'll say, we'll get calls up and say, like, some tape has come off my jacket. And
right.
Yeah, you just need to keep washing the inside, and you should ideally be washing your rain jacket every 6 months or so.
Okay.
A little bit of you can use sunlight bar soap or Sard soap. The thing that you really, really need is pH neutral soap.
Right.
You can use Tech Wash, but it tends to be rather expensive.
Yeah.
So anything that you can do to sort of keep the inside of your jacket clean, and that's the real key part about any rainwear, is just keeping the inside clean. And then you'll be able to get many more years out of your jacket, but also increase the breathability.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is really key, especially when you're coming up against some of those conditions that you were talking about. It's you really want your waterproof jacket working correctly.
Yeah.
And also waterproof head ratings. There's no industry standard as such.
Yeah.
Everybody will spit out a figure. And most of the rain jackets these days will have a lower water head rating to increase the breathability. So having necessarily the highest water head rating is not necessarily the best way to go
Right.
around things either.
Yeah, and it's interesting. My head goes to a few different places as you're talking. I didn't necessarily know things like DEET or sunscreen or just your general sweat or fog can affect the inside of your raincoat so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it tends to hydrolyze the glue that holds the layers of your jacket together.
Yeah.
Whether it be like a 3-layer, 4-layer jacket, or even like a 2.5, which is far more susceptible. So that's why you've seen a lot of an industry move away from 2-layer jackets, is that they're just so much more susceptible to delamination. Whereas at least in a 3 or 4-layer jacket, you've got much better resistance to that.
Yeah.
You've got a physical barrier as opposed to a coating, which those 2-layer jackets traditionally have.
Right. And it strikes me as well that our jackets, we're not just wearing them for the waterproofing aspect of it, and I think we've just gone into a lot of detail there. But it's that exposure nature of
often it's your windproof layer as well.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And most of us will use just a hard shell for both a windproof and a rain.
Yeah.
As well, you don't want to carry an extra jacket, so just a windproof jacket.
Yeah. So I always want to look after my raincoat, because I know that when we were just talking about it, I'm getting to the top of a ridge. I know that's going to be a lot more exposed up there, and the weather, as soon as I get over that, the wind's going to get up and hit me real hard. So I'm making sure I'm wearing it, and I want that to be quite durable and protecting me from that sort of cold and wind and rain that's coming through up there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of your only tickets to get you out of a really bad situation.
Exactly.
And that's what, like, most of the time you use them for. You don't use them out of choice.
Yeah. Look, we could probably be here all day.
Probably could. How long's your battery?
Yeah. I've got my charger. I do note on your website that there's some pretty cool family pics. Yeah,
there are.
I saw one of you.
I try to skip past those.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are your thoughts? And I saw one of you and your family on Mount Rolliston in 2006.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I thought I could pick you out, but there's also maybe a brother in there.
There's two brothers and me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Are they in the family bizzo as well?
My brother Ben's. Well, you can never really escape it. Yeah. So Ben's involved on the edges, which is great.
Yeah.
My brother Mark unfortunately passed away at Mount Cook
a
few years ago, but it's okay. He was still involved.
Yeah,
and he's still very much part of it. So
yeah.
Keep going.
Cool. And as we've sort of alluded to, I think I would love to organise a bit more of a history lesson with Dave at some point.
Yeah, you might need a longer tape than this.
Yeah, we might go for a full hour.
It's going to be
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, well, on behalf of the listeners and myself for Tararua Fever, thanks so much for imparting your knowledge. You're obviously very, very sort of savvy in this area, and I'll encourage listeners to come and check out Earthsea Sky.
Yeah, anytime.
Cool.
Any question?
Yeah.
Always here.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
Cheers, Mike. Thank you again to Mike from Earthsea Sky. If you're considering getting any new gear, I encourage you to go check out their website. Okay. Lastly on the show, I'd like to welcome property market analyst Nick Goodall. Kia ora, Nick.
Kia ora, Jerry. Thanks so much for having me on.
Goodall, if you don't mind me calling you that, Recent whispers suggest that house price inquiry in Upper Hutt, the Wairarapa, Kapiti Coast, and even southern parts of Palmerston North have been increasing at a very rapid and unusual pace. Are you able to shed any light on this matter?
Yeah, that's right, Jerry. The anecdotes that we've heard of interest, open home attendance, and finance applications have been flooding in of late, particularly compared to what we've seen across the rest of Aotearoa. We think the reason for this is due to a large desire to migrate to these areas, with many mentioning the ease of access to certain entry points of the Tararua ranges.
It sounds like there's almost a delirium amongst people at the moment.
Yeah, well said, and really interesting you mention it that way. There are separate reports of a specific type of epidemic going around right now, almost a fever, if you will, and word on the streets, or maybe we should say tracks, that DOC have issued a record number of backcountry hut passes as well.
Goodness me, Goodall. Well, thank you very much for the update. But lastly, how long has this been going on for?
Well, curiously, it's been ever since the 26th of January. Not sure if you know why that date could be significant. Perhaps the release date of a very particular podcast. Don't know, mate. I'm stumped.
Very curious, Goodall. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Okay, folks, we'll leave it there for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the interviews, and another big thank you to my darling Lex for coming on the show, Mike from Earth Sea Sky, and Nick Goodall, property analyst. I hope you've enjoyed all the content provided this week, and if you are going into the hills this weekend, please be safe, please check the weather forecast and make sure that you go out with all the appropriate equipment for where you're going. We'll be back with you in a fortnight's time, hopefully with a slightly different format to what we've done recently, but I'm going to leave you guys hanging for another fortnight until we get that one sorted. In the meantime, all the best, go well, and I can't wait to see you on the other side. See you then.